consider for a second, if there was a disease that you guys had, a chronic illness, would you guys sort of open about talking about it with people around you?
Yeah, when needed. Yeah, probably.
Probably not. Just because I just don't know if people have that kind of knowledge to be able to like deal with that. And I think I don't think some people are ready to deal with the realities of what comes with. So if I share, you know, what I'm going through, then I have to share pretty much everything because it's quite deep. Because health pretty much affects, you know, the majority of your life. So you can't conceal one part and kind of share one, like it affects everything. So yeah, I don't know if you've heard anyone that's kind of dealt with anything that's like chronic or anything.
I haven't known people personally. I think Reuben's the first person I've been introduced to that has sickle cell, and I think there was one guy in my secondary school, but again, that was kept quite on the down low. I think
You went to predominantly black secondary school, innit?
Yeah. There may have been more, but only I was aware of only one student had it. But I think I know, as you said, your experience in secondary school, speaking about it was a lot more difficult than speaking about it now, because people just weren't educated.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of, like, I can see why your resentment towards white people sort of came. I completely get it, because like you're being open about something that is affecting you, and you know, and you get comments like, you know, I don't want to say it, but yeah,
to say because you're black.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult. Like I learned from a young age that a lot of people don't have the range for certain conversations. They're not knowledgeable on certain things. So it's not everyone you must go and tell your story. I had to learn that the hard way, because, you know, that, especially at such a young age, that kind of embedded a lot of toxic, negative ways of thinking, you know, just thinking processes within me, you know, because remember at this point I'm like 9, 10, and I'm kind of just growing up with it. And again, because, you know, going back to earlier on when we was talking about it being an invisible disease and you might not necessarily see it, obviously when I had the severe limp, it could be seen, but sickle cell was still not understood with the limp. Do you get it? Because people, you know, you can hurt your ankle and walk with a limp. Do you get it? So just because I had the severe limp doesn't mean that the sickle cell was being understood. So it was still something that was kind of used against me, or, you know, challenged, contested, that sort of stuff, even reduced. So that kind of embedded a lot of just negative ways of thinking for me, especially at a young age. So it's not until I've kind of grown up and I've educated myself and, you know, I've kind of given myself, I've kind of restructured my range of thinking. Because the be all and end all of it is, you know, kids will be kids are cruel. That's what helped me to sleep better at night back then anyway. So, you know, make your own judgment on that. But it was difficult back then. But that sickle cell is definitely something I've had to mention in self-capacity in a lot of places I've been, because it's affected me so badly. You know, I have 2 brothers. The middle one doesn't have sickle cell. He's AA, so, you know, purely virgin. And then the last one, Micah, he has sickle cell. So he's got SC just like me as well. But his sickle cell isn't as bad as mine. You know, I've got stories for days that I could tell you. His one is fine in terms of how it can affect your body and, you know, change your life, because it can be very life-changing incidents, situations, crises that could, you know, just change the trajectory of your life completely. Like mine, for example. He's had the pleasure of not having to go through that. So it affects us all differently, but we can all kind of relate on the pain of a crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, kids are me, man. They tell you the truth, but without kind of caring how it's like taken. But for you, because of they were saying some stuff, like how did you, did it knock your confidence? How did you gain it back?
Do you know, I think I mentioned it a previous time. I've kind of historically had anger issues that stemmed from not being able to communicate. So just, brief background. My parents used to speak to me in Ghana a lot at home. And then I'd go to school and they would speak English. And, the way my mum put it to me was I was kind of in between the two, didn't know what to speak or what to understand or how I was understanding. And then I was kind of had delayed speech for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I would always lash out in anger when I couldn't be understood or I couldn't communicate my point across. So when I'm experiencing all of the, whatever these kids are telling me at the time, my first protocol was just to be angry. Like I'm gonna bust someone's head.
With the crutch.
No, literally. Like I used to, I would get in trouble because I was hitting people with the crutches, and as kids, you start, oh, you said this to me, and no, you did this, playground antics. So it was just always an anger thing. It did knock my confidence. It did. There was times where after it's all said and done, and I'm kind of on my own, and I'm thinking like, wait, hold on, am I really disabled because I'm black? Is this literally? And there was times where I would question it as, a 10, 11-year-old. So it has effects. And then it's like, I'm thinking like that. And then I'm now having a crisis. And then it kind of just compounds what I'm thinking. And then resentment starts to build. So it's a nasty cycle, but, I'd be lying if I said I didn't kind of go through that process at that time.
And I think Kelvin, Reuben's example is not peculiar to you. There's lots of young people, male and female, who have that experience at school. And I think it's changing now. So why do I say it's changing now? We did a session with a school group, so they would have been about 8 or 9. And I said, put your hands up. So this is a school children, 8 or 9, and it's a very mixed school. So there are black children, there are mixed race children, there are Eastern European children, it's completely mixed. And I said, put your hands up if anybody here knows anything about sickle cell. And the number of hands that went up, I was really quite shocked, to be honest, because lots of hands went up. So I kind of, given the time, I just kind of picked out some of this and I said, well, how did you know about it then? One said, my mum told me about it because she's a nurse. Another one says, but John's in class A and he's got sickle cell and he's my friend. And another one. So I was quite surprised that more knowledge about it was at that age, because you say they can, kids are very smart. But if you think for a moment about back to healthcare professionals, because it's a really important point. There are some people who live with sickle cell who have very limited resources, okay? So they, because of whatever the challenges might have been, they have to rely on social services support and stuff like that. And there's something called personal independence payments, okay? And we came across the fact that loads of people who had applied for personal independence payment were being rejected. We thought, why are all these people being rejected? And then when you dig down into it, and it confirms what Reuben is saying, a lot of the people who were making the assessments about whether John or whoever it may be required personal independent payments knew very little, if anything, about sickle cell. So one of the questions was, they would ask the person, how did you get this condition? So they didn't know it was genetic. How did you contract this condition then? So the point, another message there is that if you have sickle cell, whether it's a healthcare professional or dealing with somebody else who has to make some assessment of you, A, a lot of the time they don't understand, which is why I'm saying it's great that kids in school are getting more information, and B, they have very limited knowledge or an understanding of what the condition is.
On that note, how nuanced do you think the professionals that are going to be making decisions need to be when it comes to cultural understanding generally of the people that are going through these diseases need to be? Because I don't know if there's enough cultural training that has been administered in healthcare or even in schools. Because what struck from your stories, when those kids were saying that, what were the teachers doing? If you did mention that to a teacher, would they understand that if they're not being educated on it?
Well, I think there is a need for more cultural understanding, given that sickle predominantly affects people of colour. There is a need for more cultural understanding in the public services and people who are assessing people for whatever type of benefit or assessment they're going to have to do. But actually it goes back to the fact that as black people, and I'm saying this, sickle affects lots of other people than just black people, but it's predominantly it's people who are of colour. The issue is race. It's ignored. Why is sickle cell not as funded as well as cystic fibrosis or haemophilia? It's because the group of people that it affects. The investment have gone in other places, and I think it, to use one of the words Luca used, it's shocking that you can be responsible for health services in an area where there are lots of prevalence of sickle, but you don't do anything about it. You don't commission services or develop services or invest in those services. So the point that I'm making is that there does need to be better understanding for essentially one of the oldest genetic conditions there is, okay, and B, the biggest genetic blood condition in this country. It is shocking that there isn't more funding, more resources, and more understanding, cultural understanding as well. And I'll give you one example to illustrate this point, and this is about a young black man who was in hospital with a crisis, and he was in severe pain. So he was making lots of noise. He was in pain. So when, the sort of pain that you're getting when you're in a severe crisis means that, it's uncontrollable pain and needs to be. He was making noise. Security was called, okay? Why is security being called? Because he's a young black man who's being disruptive.
Aggressive.
Rather than deal with the pain. So security was called because of the fact that he was in pain, rather than, it's just nuance again and thinking we need to address this man's pain, and the reason he is acting the way he is because he's in pain, not because of some stereotype of an aggressive young black man.
Was this in a London hospital?
Yes. No, it wasn't. It was. There were two occasions: one in a London hospital and one in an East Midlands hospital.
Well, I think, we're not speaking from a London perspective here, but in London, it's very diverse. And there's a problem here despite that. Yet, if we're talking about places in the UK where it's predominantly white people, then it's even bigger of a problem because, you get hospitals that are used to seeing white patients coming all day, if we're talking places up north or in Cornwall. Mm-hmm. And then you get a black person with sickle cell that comes in. It's like, is the place really equipped to give that the same level of understanding and consideration? as you would be in a London hospital where there's already an existing problem anyway.
Yeah, it's a great question,
Like-
Luca. It's a really great question,
Yeah.
and the answer to that is you're right. You're right. So if you take Cornwall and places that we call low prevalence areas for sickle cell, if somebody has a crisis in those areas, so let's example, they may go on holiday to Cornwall, for example, and they get ill because they're in Cornwall on holiday. Cornwall's not seeing regular people with sickle. They're not. So for some of the staff, it will be completely new. So one of the important things, Luca, is that we have been discussing, and it's been implemented, that there are specialist centres for sickle across the country.
I see.
So that actually that if you are Cornwall General Hospital and you're only seeing a few people with sickle, there's a centre near you that they can seek advice and support from and transfer if needs be. So that's what we're trying to create, the specialism. And, here in South London, Guy's and Thomas's is a specialist centre, King's is a specialist centre, and there'll be other specialist centres in other parts of the country. But it's a really important point you make, and that's why you need specialist centres, because, if anybody has cancer in this country, they go to a cancer centre. They don't go just to a normal district general hospital. They go to a cancer centre, and we want that expertise to be built up for sickle.
So interesting to say this about this, geographically, and if you had sickle cell in these places, because I just got to share this, because one of my very good friends has sickle cell, and he went through this severe pain that you're mentioning in King's College Hospital, dissection. Do you know where I'm coming from? And this is down the road, I'm coming from, in an area that's very diverse, as we know. We grew up around here. So, and now he's got that on his record, being sectioned. That has now long-lasting implications on how he's perceived. So, that's why I ask these questions about cultural nuances and having people in the right places to really understand what people are going through. And effectively, my question is, what type of learning, how do we get that education out there to people for them to really understand what people like Reuben are experiencing?
So one of the ways that you can improve cultural competence within healthcare professionals or other professionals who are dealing with people with sickle cell is exposing them to people like Reuben and others like your brother or sister or whoever. And the example is that we believe strongly that when you're being taught at medical school, you can teach all the kind of clinical expertise as you like, but we encourage that there should be somebody living with sickle cell talking to those young trainee doctors as well. That's one of the ways. So we think it's important that the training at a very early stage, not just doctors, nurses and other professionals, includes people who live with sickle cell. They can see, they can hear, and they can listen and know what the experience is.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that as well, I know it might not be the most enlightening advice to give healthcare professionals, but I feel like you'll be surprised at how quickly this situation can rectify itself if you listen and support. Because, we sicklers, if we're going into hospital one more time, we know what we need. So when you offer resistance to it, it just inflames the whole situation. And remember, I'm already in a painful episode, and now you coming at me with this, I can imagine your boy who was having a crisis and he was in severe pain, and then now he's getting dissectioned, or you end up getting dissectioned. That whole process is now adding stress on top of the crisis, which inflames the whole situation already. So something that could have been treated has now gone past that threshold and is now can produce life-changing, ramifications. So, yeah, just in general, listening and support. And I want to bring up a case that happened where there was a boy who had sickle cell in hospital, and he was calling the nurses because he needed painkillers and, you know, all of that stuff. The nurses were ignoring him. They didn't really take him seriously, to the point where he ended up calling the ambulance whilst in the hospital, on the ward, in a hospital bed, and he ended up dying because they didn't listen to him. They didn't, imagine he's on the ward, admitted already in hospital. The nurses just ignored him. He called the ambulance because he needed help, and he ended up dying. So literally, it's stop trying to do the most, do the bare minimum, and then work your way up. Because if you're not listening to us, if you're not supporting us, what else do you think you can do to help us? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that case that Reuben's talking about happened in North London in Tottenham. And I know Betty and Charles very well, so I'll say his name because it's Evan Nathan Smith, a young man who was 22. This was about 4 years ago, and we wrote a report that said we shouldn't have any more young black men or women dying in hospital in that way. And so one of the reports we shared with Councillor Portier is a report that's called No One's Listening. And that No One's Listening report refers to that case that Reuben is talking about. But the other problem in that case was that he was admitted in hospital, he wasn't being listened to, but the haematology team weren't contacted to say that Evan was there until the very last minute. So the point about that is one about, if somebody's admitted, the haematology team should be notified really quickly, because you go, apart from A&E, you'll be seeing your haematologist most of the time, and they need to know. It's no point admitting somebody, and I think that in Evan's case, and his parents are great, because this is Betty's and Charles' only child. And to lose him at that age in those circumstances, I have the most utter respect for them both. But it highlighted to us, which is why we called it No One's Listening. They weren't listening to Evan, the healthcare professionals weren't listening, politicians, funders weren't listening. So that's why we produced the report. And in Evan's case, it wasn't just that example. There are still cases where young and older people with sickle cell have sadly passed, and the passing is linked to inadequacies in the system and caring, and some of the things that we've all been talking about today, about education, knowledge, cultural competence and so forth.
What part does language have to play with that, in using the right terminology to allow healthcare professionals to understand exactly what you're saying? So what I'm essentially saying, growing up in our area, people have a certain way of speaking that people might look down upon when you go into hospitals, or for instance, parents with accents, if they're trying to articulate what their child is going through and they don't have the language, how do they communicate so they can be listened to when already you're at odds, because there might be that racism that we're talking about? What words are the trigger words that we can use to simplify the question?
I'll come back. I'll let Reuben go first.
So how do we,
what language do the healthcare professionals need to be privy to?
Yeah.
In order.
How can we communicate with healthcare professionals?
I personally, I think the way that we speak or we rate, I think a healthcare professional who is dealing with somebody with sickle cell needs to show compassion. They need to address the pain as quickly as possible, and certainly within the 30 minutes. The issues about whether mum, dad, brother or sister is speaking in patois or some other, broken English isn't the issue. They know what sickle cell is, and they know, and it goes back, I'm sorry to say, but it goes back to training and competence and understanding and support, and just being compassionate and caring and dealing with it quickly. So that 30-minute guideline I told you, which is a national guideline wherever you live, okay, you should get pain relief within those 30 minutes. When there was an audit done of how many hospitals met that standard, it was less than 80%.
Because as healthcare professionals, you're heavily educated in treating and having knowledge on this, but that's not it. That's only half of it to make up your job. Your job should be, especially in London, specifically with the number of people coming in every day who speak in broken English. You have to be able to deal with that. Like, it shouldn't even be a question of not being able to. Even if you're somewhere in a predominantly white area, it's like that should be such a big part of your job that in some ways is overlooked, I think. And I don't know how equipped healthcare professionals are on this. Have there been experiences where someone has come in that you know of, a parent with more broken English, and they haven't got the help as efficient as one would who is speaking, who is white speaking English?
Luca, we haven't had examples through our helpline of people who haven't been able to get the right treatment or indeed compassion because of lack of English. So clearly there'll be people with sickle whose first language isn't English. So the only case that I can think of is where we had to get Portuguese help get a Portuguese interpreter because that was a case of a Brazilian person with sickle cell and English was not there for, so there was a Portuguese interpreter that was organised, but by and large. Being really bilingual, going back to Reuben's point about talking the two, being bilingual is an actual blessing today. Is an actual blessing today to be bilingual. So that's a positive thing.
Okay, that's good.
Also going on that, because I'm gonna explain a situation that happened to me literally in April, where language was a little bit of a barrier as well. But I was also going to play that question back to you. Forget sickle cell. If any one of us was to now kind of hit the deck in a heap of pain, screaming, how would you deal with that?
I'll go see him, call 999.
Right. Does he need to speak a certain language for you to be able to assist him in any way? Let's say you don't need 999, but there's a way for you to be able to help him. Does he need to speak a certain language for you to be able to kind of understand that?
No. In an ideal situation.
Well, okay, cool. I understand the ideal situation, but what I'm saying is, it's not like he's speaking Spanglish. He can say he's in pain. You can see he's in pain. You can see, let's say he needs a cup of water to be able to heal wherever he's going through, or any one of us is going through, and he can communicate that to you. What else would you need? Like, what resistance will you show to that, if any?
Yes, me?
Yeah.
I wouldn't. However, what I'm essentially saying is there are biases that people carry when they see people.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I understand that, and obviously we've delved into that. But what I'm saying is, outside of basic knowledge that you're going to need of certain things that you're going to deal with, because in a hospital, you don't know what you're going to come across on any given night. But outside of the base knowledge, as far as language and communication and whatnot, it's more on you, the healthcare professional. We can only do so much. If you have your own biases, then you shouldn't be on the front line in the first place. That's the way I see it, because I'm not speaking Swahili, I'm speaking a language that we can all understand. And at this point, my language isn't what you're offering resistance to. It's your own biases. So already, there's certain people that can't do certain jobs because, you have certain stereotypes, biases, whatever that impedes your ability to practice. So literally it is about the healthcare professional on the front line at that moment as well. So as far as language, I don't think there's much that we can do. But going to the situation, so I was in Greece, literally April. I was in Greece on holiday. It was my missus' birthday, so took her to Greece to go and celebrate. And the holiday ended up going bad. I had a crisis out there. I think it took 2 days.
Oh, wow.
Literally. We left on Easter Sunday, and I think come Tuesday morning, I was in hospital. So I had a crisis out there, went to the hospital. The people in the ambulance couldn't really speak English. My missus is in a panic. I'm in a whole heap of pain. I'm screaming down the place. And then, essentially I pass out. I wake up and I'm in a hospital bed. My missus is there. Oh, babe, you okay? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm just kind of in and out of it. And language was a problem because not a lot of them could speak English. I couldn't speak Greek, any other, mutual. There was no mutual language per se. If they could speak English, it was broken a lot of the time. But they understood the case. They understood what sickle cell was to an extent. They understood that I was in discomfort. They understood that I was in pain. So they offered what is usual for someone who is in pain. And obviously, sickle cell does exist in Greece, right? So they had some sort of, foundation to go off. So it was lucky for me that I was in Greece and had this, because if I could have been anywhere else, it could have been a very different case. So I was in Greece in a hospital bed, still having crisis. So my mum decides to fly out. She decides to fly out, and she tells my missus, to go back, and she'll kind of handle it. So she came, and there was literally like a day where like all three of us were there in Greece. But I was in and out. I was in and out. I think this might have been Thursday. So my missus was flying back on Friday, and my mum had landed that Thursday as well. So, literally Thursday, the last one I remember, and then I wake up the following Thursday, and my mum she just looked so happy to see me. So I was like, oh, what's happening? Like, what's the excitement for? So my mum's just like, oh my gosh, are you okay? How you feeling? Blah, blah, blah. Are you hungry? Do you need to drink? Blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, I'm okay. I was still in pain, but I was like, I was okay. So then the doctors have now come. Well, the nurses have now come. So they're like, oh my gosh, you look so much better. The ones that can kind of speak English. Oh my gosh, you're looking so much better now. Then you were on Friday, and I was like, oh, thanks. So she's left, and I said, Mum, what day is it today? She said, oh, it's Thursday. I said, what the It's Thursday. Wasn't as in the same day. Where's she? Because I'm thinking it's the same day. I'm thinking, where's Shanice?
You've been out.
I've been out of it. So the doctors have now come in. They're saying, oh, you look so much better than you did on Friday. Well done. I'm happy with the results, blah, blah, blah. So he's left, and I've looked at my mum, and she's kind of just, tentative around the situation. I can see she doesn't want me to inquire about what the is going on.
Yeah.
So specialists have now come in. Oh, you look so much better. I'm happy with the results. Hopefully this can keep up. So they've left. So I said, Mum, what happened on Friday? Like, what did I miss? And she, she did the typical Africa thing, just honestly, what I saw on Friday, I never want to see it again. But obviously, I'm still out of it. Like, I'm off mana on morphine, opioids, whatever. And I've just come out of being comatose. So I don't even have the faculties to chase up what happened on Thursday. I'm literally asking her, Mum, what happened on Friday, sorry. And then I'm passing out. So I've woken up again. It's Friday. I'm still trying to question what's happening. She's not telling me. And she knows it. She knows I'm going to pass out soon. So it's like, she doesn't even need to, pay me any mind. And that's exactly what happens. I pass out, and it got to a point where I just stopped asking, because I think it even got to a point where I even forgot that all of this shit was happening anyway. It got to a point where I was just like, this is just a normal admission, except I'm in Greece. Anyway, long story short, I was in Greece for about 2 to 3 weeks. before I came back to UK. And obviously it was the doctors out there didn't sign me off as safe for flight because they was worried that the flight was obviously going to cause sickle because the air pressure up there is just a lot different. But it was a whole thing. We had to go and buy oxygen, which cost me like £500, and obviously with the whole insurance thing over there, it cost me about like £500-600, and it was just cash loss. Anyways, long story short, made it back here, and I was home for a couple of days before I then went into hospital with Guys and St Thomas's here, this country. So when I was in Guys and St Thomas's, obviously they did the scans, chest scans, whatever. Just to outline what actually happened, I had a crisis in my legs. So it was all my knees, ankles, hips, all down, and then it kind of migrated up to my spine. So it was along my spine and then my chest. Those are usually my hotspots for crisis. So when I was in the hospital here, they did their scans and then they found 2 pulmonary embolisms, 1 in each lung.
What was that?
Blood clots in the lungs. Yeah, blood clots in the lungs. So I was in the hospital here for a week, and then I went home, and then I was okay. And then literally, I was at my mum's house with my missus, and we was kind of just talking about a whole bunch of stuff, like just family stuff and, usual stuff. And then I was like, oh yeah, Mum, what happened? Mind you, this is like up to a month later. So I said, Mum, what happened? So she kind of took a pause, and then she was like, oh, Rubes, you had a heart attack when you was in Greece. So she explained to me how it all happened. Literally had a chest crisis, blood wasn't flowing, oxygen wasn't flowing, my lungs started to fill up with fluids, they were struggling to function. And then obviously, a lot of the organs take a battering whilst you're having a crisis, kidneys, spleen, liver, all that sort of stuff. So they started failing. Then the lungs started failing, so all that was left was the heart. And then the doctor said that the heart was struggling, and I think it was cardiomyopathy.
Cardiomyopathy. Yeah.
Right, which is essentially when the heart gets thin and struggles to contract and pump blood throughout the body, or I think it goes the opposite way as well, and it gets thicker as well and kind of swells up. So that's what was happening, and obviously the heart was trying to work with the lungs had already failed, the heart was on its own, heart failure, and then that's when it all happened. So obviously that's what happened on a Friday. So literally I was just comatose. She said this happened at like 9 in the morning. So literally I was just comatose throughout all of that. And that's when she told me that, because literally that's the first time I had heard of it. And I didn't know how to feel about that, really. I've been in hospital multiple times, I've had a stroke, I've had infarctions, I've had vascular necrosis, hip replacement, all of that kind of stuff. I've had all of that stuff. And it's like, as you grow up, you kind of just get used to it. I got used to it. But that one was just a bit, I don't know, nothing that was as severe as this.
Well,
going.
I think, and this is really important, that so I don't have sickle cell, although I run the organisation that is responsible for changing policy and improving things. But there's work to be done in raising the awareness of all of the implications of sickle for people who live with sickle as well, because I've always known that if you have an acute chest syndrome, it's like a heart attack. It's like a heart attack. So I've always known that. Our staff know. So we need to do more, because there are lots of complications, and Reuben's mentioned some of them: stroke, the necrosis of the hip, and so forth. There's lots of, but acute chest syndrome and circa heart attacks are one of those complications as well, which is why I said earlier that treating sickle cell quickly is important. The more you leave it, the more deterioration occurs. So I think from that example that which you've come through, and we're glad that you're here talking about it. There's a message there about how even for people who live with the condition, to know all of the nuances, to use your word, nuances of this is such a complex and unpredictable. It can happen at any time, so it's not like, well, next week I'm going to get a crisis. It just can happen at any time, and stress can bring it on. So we all get stressed for various things in our lives. So just think, when somebody with sickle gets stressed, that could be the point of pain.
What was your biggest learning? What's your full circle moment from this conversation? When we wrap up.
Well, I say just improving my understanding of the disease and how it varies and affects people, and especially hearing it from someone who is going through it and someone who works closely within the organisation. It's very enlightening, and health isn't something I particularly talk about a lot. So to do that is, I'm undoubtedly going to be learning a lot within this conversation, which is very good. It's very good.
Yeah, for me, I think my full circle moment here in this conversation is just, I would say, decreasing my ignorance, So I feel like from the background where I'm from, being Ghanaian, there's a lot of ignorance to, other chronic diseases, mental health in general. So I feel like having this conversation just minimizes the ignorance around it. Now I can have the confidence to really amplify people's voices when it comes to what they go through. So, but I think the other part is just seeing how, despite what you've been through, you're still here. Do you know what I mean? You're still thriving, and that's my takeaway here, because I almost take health for granted and stuff like that, and I don't even think about it. But kind of seeing you go through it, it's just like, it just gives me that little extra. Do you know what I mean?
I guess my full circle moment is a number of things, actually, because it's a privilege to be here with Luca, Kelvin and Reuben, and hearing Reuben's story, which confirmed many of the things. So Reuben and I haven't met before, but actually we were at one on the, and I didn't know that, Reuben was, had necrosis of the hip and had crutches, but actually that full circle moment of sitting next to Reuben, knowing that actually he was going through a crisis, should tell us all something about pain and the fact that, yes, it might not have been severe, but he was in pain. And I think that's my full circle, which illustrates the kind of complexity and unpredictability of this condition. And here in the Greece experience, it's good, as Kelvin said, that you're standing strong and talking to us about it today.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, take your time.
It's giving me emotion as well.
Fuck up my contacts. No, just thinking about my full circle moment. It's just the fact I'm doing all right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Strong.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening to the Full Circle today. To support people with sickle cell, you can visit www.sicklecellsociety.org.